be, he said.
Everybody, I'd like to call to order a special meeting of the Town of Superior Board of Trustees for April 17, 2012. And Phyllis, if you'd call the roll.
Mayor Andrew Buckle.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Evia Gregori.
Here.
Trustees Joseph Roy.
Here.
Chris Hansen.
Here.
Sandy Pennington.
Here.
Lisa Skubas. Deborah Williams.
Here.
Town Manager Matt Magley.
Here.
Town Attorney Christine Strateski. Here. I did that.
It's the first time.
Well,
Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
By Trustee Gregori, second by Trustee Williams. Discussion. All in favor? Unanimous. That brings us to item number 4, discussion and approval of the funding for a lobbyist regarding the Jefferson Parkway and the Beltway Economic Enhancement Project bill. Mr. Magley.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 2 items on the agenda tonight, both centered around a bill that's being discussed as being introduced into the current session for the General Assembly. Staff became aware of this bill late last week, as did most people, I think. It hasn't been introduced into the General Assembly yet, but there's been talk that it's going to be, and it's not going to be, so some uncertainty there on for sure it's going to be introduced. But this bill would basically create a Beltway completion authority, which is centered around completion of the Denver metro area Beltway that's been discussed and planned for years in parts. It includes the E470 loop, the Northwest Parkway, and this proposed Jefferson Parkway would be included in that as well. I think the general consensus on a number of people, especially those on the local front, municipalities and counties, believe this is a bad bill and would have significant negative impacts to local communities, including the Town of Superior. The bill essentially, as drafted, would create authority that is represented by 15 metro communities, plus CDOT, Highlands Ranch Metropolitan District, and the Public Highway, or the High Performance Transportation Authority, which is the toll pulling authority, basically. And there doesn't seem to be like there much thought went into how or who got selected to be on this authority in the bill as it's currently written. It would give dominant eminent domain to the authority, which means they could grant authority to take private property, local property, override any city's 1041 regulations. It would allow the toll road development anywhere in the Denver metropolitan area, not just on the Jefferson Parkway proposed route. It would allow no environmental review to need to be taken, and it would make it illegal for cities to enter into IGAs. So just the things that I've mentioned just kind of give you an idea of the just significant impacts it would have on our municipality. So what's being proposed or been discussed with staff and our current representation by Mr. Gable House is possibly hiring a lobbyist to represent the town to oppose this bill in the General Assembly. We met with Dan Williams, myself, and Tim Gable House, and our town attorney, Kendrick Carberry, met with him yesterday. He is a current lobbyist and doesn't have any current conflicts that would make it, he doesn't have any current conflicts in representing the town against this bill. He's in attendance tonight, as well as Tim Gable House, if the board has any questions for them. Recommending a not to exceed amount of $10,000, which would come out of the town's legislative lobbying line item. General fund has current capacity to handle this expense. This would protect the town's interest against this bill, as well as any negative impacts that it will have. The only negative or con would be that if the bill doesn't get introduced and we spend funds, that money's spent and it's lost. It's fairly, it's a significant bill, so it would be justified in spending this money if the board chooses to stop it from being introduced even in the General Assembly. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if it doesn't get introduced this session, that it won't reappear next session as well, so keep that in mind. And then Dan Williams is here, and Tim as well, if you have any questions for them.
Trustee Williams?
I just wanted to start on the obvious as far as the funds, where this is going to come from. And you said it's the legislature funds that we normally use. In that line item on the budget, how much have we already used under that?
We had $8,000 budgeted for the year. We spent $6,800, and that was for lobbying associated with the US 36 improvements and our Washington, D.C. trip that we take each year. So we have a firm that we partner with all the US 36 communities with to hire for lobbying efforts.
So we'll be using the remaining of those funds, and then
the cover would come from the general fund.
Trustee Gross?
Can you talk for a minute about the alternatives that considered?
As far as the lobbying effort goes?
Yeah, I mean, one of them is, one of the alternative considers do not hire lobbyists and oppose the bill by contacting local state representatives.
Right, yeah.
I don't think it has to be either or. To me, I would do both.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll just,
And then the other one is delay hiring a lobbyist until the bill is actually introduced.
I'd rather hire a lobbyist now and prevent it from even being introduced, so if that's at all possible.
So those were the two alternatives that were discussed in the memo.
Hey, Matt, is
Trustee
there
Hanson.
anything, I'm sorry, is there anything that we can do before the bill is introduced as a town in lieu of hiring a lobbyist? I mean, can we pick up the lobbyist job right now until the bill is announced?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a number of things we can do. I mean, I think, I contacted Colorado Municipal League, which has some influence in the legislature. And I think some of the board members have contacted local state state representatives. That's one thing. We'll have this resolution tonight for the board to consider approving, and we can send that out. The local press is here with the Daily Camera, and then as well our representation on Dr. Cobb tomorrow night. They have their meeting, which there'll be discussion on this as well. So.
Yeah, I'd like to see how that goes tomorrow night. So are you planning on speaking?
Yeah,
Okay.
in fact, I was going to answer your question further, that I plan to speak about this bill with our talking points that we have developed as well. I've spoken to almost a dozen elected officials and mayors in the area, and all of the ones I've spoken to so far are against this bill and are planning on speaking to Dr. Cog about it. Personally, we don't really know what Dr. Cog, the board, is going to do as far as this particular bill. They've put it on the agenda as something to discuss. Whether the board is going to take action on it or not, I don't know. Most likely, it's going to be an hour and a half discussion and then some, and someone will make some kind of motion to either oppose it, monitor it, or support it. And I find it unlikely that they're going to table it and say that they would like more information. We authorized Dr. Cog's staff to look into this further. Well, I mean, we have the bill in front of us. I don't know what more we're going to find out about it. So I think there'll be some kind of action. I don't think it's going to be just, oh, well, thank you very nice for the bill, and, we'll talk later. So it's going to be a very interesting meeting and a very, very long meeting. So you're welcome to come with. I'm leaving at about 5 to get there a little early.
Okay.
So anyone is welcome in my car on the way there.
Okay. So I'd like to see us, if there's going to be anything that we can do instead of what the lobbyists would do. So if we would overlap jobs or responsibilities, then I'd like to see us pick that up first and do as much as we can. But I understand also that lobbyists could provide a lot of value to us and do a lot that we can't do. In which case, I would probably be for hiring them.
Trustee Pennington?
I also, as alternate, intend to go to Dr. Cog and speak as necessary in public comment on it. I believe I can speak as well as you be the official representative. Reading through the Dr. Cog materials thus far, I think it's a very precarious situation, and I'm very glad we're having this meeting tonight to adopt an official resolution. I would suggest, Deb, as the primary on Dr. Cog, that you actually forward this resolution, if passed, to the full Dr. Cog board tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Or well in advance.
Not a problem.
As well as do
Itching.
lobbying work with the local Dr. Cog representatives who expect our assistance on their behalves, and let them know where we are on this and ask for their support on it as well. And then, Chris, in terms of what we can all do, I actually propose, I was going to send it to everybody, but I'll just verbalize it. I think we have to pull out all stops on this particular one. I think a well-chosen lobbyist, and we'll get to interview the candidate, hits the ground running and has access and knowledge of the State House that we don't necessarily have. However, if the lobbyist is agreeable, I would hope perhaps those of us who wish to actually go to the State House and meet one-on-one with various regional legislators, as well as whoever, that we go, you tell us, you divvy us up, you tell us who to go, we agree on speaking points, et cetera. So I think our presence on Capitol Hill, at the Capitol, is good. And in my little proposal, it's 4 steps. One is to get residents involved via email. via e-blast, and give them a list of the email addresses of all elected officials, and ask them to contact them. I hope we will continue to coordinate very closely with Golden and complement and work together on this, because obviously we're both very affected. And then I think what Matt already said, to the extent senior staff, to the extent our attorneys, and to the extent we all have different contacts, because we've sort of split up responsibilities in terms of the region, that we really proactively contact all those people and express our displeasure and ask for their support. So to me, it's a
Can I ask
multi-pronged
question
thing.
So I can see Golden really pushing against this, but it doesn't really seem that it impacts us. So are we doing this more support of Golden, or how does it impact us directly?
I think it impacts us really profoundly.
I
and,
agree, absolutely, 100%.
If this bill were to
I'm sorry, it's a meeting, so if you wouldn't mind.
You do have to step to the
Name
microphone.
and
Yeah, sorry.
address, and
Oh, sorry.
no worries.
They all want to hear your lovely voice.
Oh, please. Tim Gablehouse, Outside Counsel. If this bill were to pass, this new authority could choose a right-of-way that goes anywhere. And so that right-of-way could certainly come right up McIntyre.
McCaslin.
McCaslin.
Sorry. And that, it could come right up McCaslin, it could cut across open space that's been acquired by the town without regard. I mean, they could choose whatever right-of-way they want. They're not confined to any existing land use or other master planning activities.
So this, I thought it would be limited just to the Jefferson Parkway. So you're saying, I think these are things our residents need to know if we're going to support something like this. So it could be anywhere in this region or in the state?
Yeah, the authority is to complete a beltway, which means this new authority could, if they wanted to, decide to establish tolls on existing C-470 in order to pay for other development. They could pick a right-of-way, they could realign C-470, they could expand C-470, they could muck around with US 36, they can change other right-of-ways to connect the Northwest Parkway to 470. It's basically unlimited in terms of the things they could do for beltway purposes. So, no, it is not limited to just the little segment between Northwest Parkway and C-470. It frankly includes all of 470 and anything you want to consider to be part of the existing beltway. The other thing I would say, and Trustee Pennington is exactly right, what is critical is to have contacts at all levels, elected officials to elected officials, staff to staff, attorneys to attorneys, lobbyists to lobbyists. The thing that my experience tells me about the State House is an awful lot of decisions are made at levels well below the actual members of the General Assembly. They're made at staff, many of whom are volunteers. They're made at the lobbyist levels. To be effective, we need to have contacts and work this at all those levels.
Trustee Williams.
And I think this bill is written specifically in order to facilitate the Beltway wherever it may go. If this particular route of the Jefferson Parkway, as it is aligned, doesn't work out, it won't be an issue. They will have a recourse in order to choose another route and not deal with any entity. In fact, I was reading right here this one quote that I think sums it all to me, is in quotes, "or combinations to frustrate the purposes of the authority." Well, clearly these IGAs and all these negotiations that they've been making with different counties and municipalities is frustrating the authority, the current authority, which is the Jefferson Parkway, the JPPHA. So I think that they wrote this in such a way that they can change the route in any way, shape, or form. So it could be, 128 and partially condemn the land up on level 3 and that whole, open space that we already have behind all of our residents' homes. They could condemn that area and decide, forget that, we're not going diagonal, we're going across. So,
Trustee Gregoris.
Does this not seem like it's an attempt to bypass the judicial process that we're in the midst of?
I think.
I mean, it certainly looks that way to me.
Tim Gablehouse again. Yes and no. It is pretty clear, and I realize we're not in executive session, so I won't be completely fulsome. It's pretty clear that we're not going to see resolution of the existing legislation until late this year, or litigation rather, until late this year. And then with appeal afterwards, who knows? But that litigation only concerns a little short stretch of a proposed beltway. What this bill does is essentially say, we really don't care.
That's what it feels
what
like to me
happens.
too, right?
We don't care about the Fish and Wildlife Service. We don't care about Rocky Flats. We could decide to pox on all of you, and we run this road over to 93 and go that way. Or if we want to, we can come screaming through anybody's open space between here and Broomfield and cut across. Wherever it feels right. And since you've eliminated any local control and any local planning process here, and given the constitution of this authority, you've got people who are an awful long ways from this road who, under this bill, could approve it. And the people in this area could all vote against it, and it would still happen.
Right, that's what it feels like to me too. Why not wait though to see the litigation, take place in perhaps then? I'm not sure why they're trying to do that now.
Because I believe the reason they're trying to do that now is because litigation is over a short segment, and there is no plan to connect Northwest Parkway to that segment, nor to connect that segment to the rest of 470. And you have people at some level who are saying, oh, to heck with all of this piecemeal stuff, this is build the road. And ramming this down everybody's throat is how you just go build the road.
Okay.
Trustee Pennington.
So, Tim, from your review of this, from my review, which may be incorrect, it appears that they're saying we can do anything we want. We can take property from government. We can take property from private citizens. We can do whatever we want. And, oh, by the way, there can be no environmental reviews of what we do. Is that how you're reading it?
Yeah, the only environmental review that would be required is if you were talking about connections to federally funded stuff, and that would be a simple EA and an interchange study.
So let's conceptualize here. We're against the Jefferson Parkway in part because of plutonium and health and safety concerns. They say to heck with all that. We're just going to move to the east a little bit. We're going to preempt that. Right now, I think it's somebody's open space right there on the other east side of Indiana. We're just going to move over there, continue the same exact sort of plan. They get out of the environmental sort of thing. They can proceed willy-nilly with literally no recourse because they've been granted carte blanche, do whatever they want.
Other than paying fair value, and one can always argue about what the fair value is of open space.
But eminent domain doesn't approach fair value usually,
Well,
correct?
Typically not. I mean, what's the value of open space? And the answer is not much. I mean, they could put the road through open space here. They could put the road through open space that, you and Boulder have acquired and go on the west side.
Right.
Everything's open. They do not have to deal with the federal government. In fact, they would undoubtedly avoid dealing with the federal government because that would trigger an EIS and a major federal decision. So as long as they get out the checkbook, you got to figure, I mean, there's nothing in this bill that talks about how you finance it other than you can make deals. So we can make whatever, they can grant concessions, they can make deals. There's nothing that limits the eminent domain power to just the footprint of a road. They could use the eminent domain power to do other kinds of development. They could carve out stuff to developers. I mean, it's really very wide. Very wide.
Trustee Williams?
So I find it interesting that we can't build out fast tracks in our corridor because there's no money, but we have the money to complete the Beltway, which we don't want and don't need. I find that unconscionable.
Trustee,
Was that a question?
No.
I didn't think so.
It's a statement.
Yeah,
Trustee Pennington, and then I have a couple of questions and public comment.
While we're on unconscionable things, I find it most interesting that this Beltway, the Jefferson Parkway, has gotten as far as it has, largely because of IGAs drafted between Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority, the County of Boulder, and the City of Boulder. But oh, by the way, in this legislation as proposed, localities better dang not well try to enter into joint IGAs to stop it. So we can only use IGAs to advance it. We can't use IGAs to stop it. So that's just one of a multitude of offensive things in this bill.
and you'll notice the JPPHA is not a member of the board.
Nor is the town of Superior.
Well, of course not.
So a couple of questions just in terms of funding. So at the $10,000 level, in terms of our purchasing policy, what does that trigger?
What do you,
Request for proposals,
oh,
that
right,
type
yeah,
of stuff?
Yeah. Well, the policy states that at that level, we would get formal bids or proposals from at least 3 vendors, unless it's determined that for whatever reason, whether we are piggybacking on another the state or the county or somebody who's already bid out a similar service and got good bids, then we can maybe use that. Or if we want to, the town would like to sole source to a specific company because of their expertise or some other reason that would make sense to select just that one firm without going to get proposals. I had discussions with another lobbyist about submitting a proposal as well for this service, but due to the current session and where they're at and the time frame, one day of turning around, they weren't able to submit anything for this, and said that they wouldn't plan on submitting anything for this session.
So just in terms of any resolution, if we were going to go down this pathway, I'd just recommend a whereas or a clause about why we're doing this without following our purchasing contracts, our purchasing policy.
And right now on your agenda is not a resolution, just a simple motion to expend the funds.
Yeah, and
So
I
we wouldn't
guess
have
right.
and it would be a contract between Mr. Gibblehouse's firm and the lobbyist, not the town and the lobbyist.
Right.
So it would be done a little bit differently than a typical.
Well, I guess I would like to have some sort of finding of fact about why we're not following our typical processes. So I don't know how that would necessarily read, or maybe it doesn't read, or maybe somebody reads something into the record about why we're going down this route. I mean, I think it's defensible since the session is going to end in it's going to end in 2 weeks, right?
We could
So.
pull the language right out of the purchasing policy, actually, for the warehouse clause. I'd have to pull it up, but there's.
Okay. And then, let's see, so I think that we have the heretofore unmentioned lobbyist in the room, and my question to that person would be, what services will you provide for us, and can you describe them in generality?
I can, and let me introduce myself. I'm Danny Williams, and I am a lobbyist at the state capitol. Let me give you a little background, and I'm going to get to your answer. I'm born and raised up in Edwards, Colorado, on a ranch, and by 1976, I decided to run for county commissioner at the ripe age of 29, and was an Eagle County commissioner from 76 to 84, continuing to be a rancher. In 84, then I ran for the legislature and served in the Colorado House from 84 to 92. And after that, then I retired from that portion of politics and became a contract lobbyist representing a variety of different business interests mostly. And so I do try to keep those clients separated by issues. So I have an alcohol client, the Colorado Beer Distributors Association. I have a oil and gas client, which is Williams out of Tulsa. It is mostly their pipeline and midstream division. I represent the Colorado Cattlemen, Colorado Wool Growers, and Colorado Horse Council. Their issues generally align on private property issues and livestock issues. So I have a number of different clients that I have judiciously tried to keep separated by issue so that it reduces the potential for conflict. I represent the Colorado River Water Conservation District over in western Colorado, which is a public policy board that deals with water issues. So that's kind of my closest client that is a governmental client. And so I bring almost 27 years, I think, of expertise in the political process to what I do as a lobbyist. And I am sensitive to cities and counties' need to be transparent and to follow purchasing and hiring practices and contracting practices. Having been a county commissioner, very sensitive to that. I think that you have a couple of situations in front of you. One is time is of the essence. And so sometimes you have to make a decision based on how important an issue is, and can you, in fact, go with a sole source provider that has the expertise to meet the challenge given the time frame. And that's probably where you're at. I see the value as a lobbyist, and if you choose not to use me and use someone else, that's fine. I will still tell you that I think the value of having a full-time lobbyist, full-time for the next 28 days isn't a very long time, but is that that lobbyist will help you develop good strategies in terms of how can you best get your voice heard in that legislative process. So that's probably the most important thing, is to help you develop those key kinds of strategies to coordinate an effort to make sure that you can maximize your effectiveness to get the results you want in that legislature. And quite frankly, I think the result will last longer than this session. I see this bill as potentially a placeholder. I see this bill as potentially moving to try to force people to make commitments in a bargaining process that they otherwise probably wouldn't make if they weren't under the pressure of that gun, and secondly, to move into a strategy for next year where the going may get even tougher. Secondly, the value of having a lobbyist at the General Assembly. This is proven true because now there are hundreds of lobbyists representing hundreds of special interests like yourselves, is that we are the eyes and the ears on a constant basis so that we can get that information as quickly back to you so that you can assimilate that information and perhaps change or modify your strategy, again, to be the most effective. And then specifically when you can't be there and you want to make sure that someone's contacted, that person can do that and help open doors when that strategy includes you as part of that effective effort. So I do think that there is value to hiring someone. I'm sensitive to the complications of contracting with sole source. I would suggest that because time is of the essence and you need a person with expertise, understanding local government and understanding the critical time nature of what you got going on here, that I think that probably to some extent overrides complexities of going through a bidding process. However, because I do think you're going to face this issue probably through the summer and for sure next January, it gives you then time to go through some process if you want to do an RFP, if you want to do a bid, and if you're faced then with additional activity through the summer or next year. So I hope I've answered your question,
Yeah.
but it is a delicate issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, very clearly. So if I could, there's, I think, some public comment regarding this, and then we'll have plenty of time for more discussion.
One question
Yep.
of our attorney.
Yes.
Our hired attorney, either attorney can chime in. Are you aware of any precedent for creation of an authority with such wide-ranging powers in the state?
The closest, Tim Gablehouse again, the closest precedent would be E470. But quite frankly, it really wasn't necessary to run over people to build that. You had a proposal on super slab that was similar, but of course that met an inglorious death for a lot of the same reasons that we would oppose this.
Okay. Yep.
Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, at the mic and name it. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm Kevin Ryan. So I sent an email to town today that I think a couple of you read. Thanks. First, just a quick comment. This is an important session. This is an important topic. So thank you for having this special meeting. The notice today, not exactly the 24-hour notice that you guys have been doing over email. Please just try to do that 24-hour notice. I think it's tough to ask us all to swing by town hall to see if anything's happening. So thanks for considering that. Second comment, I do want to point out that I think you guys have two important topics on the agenda today. The first is whether or not we should hire lobbyists. I think that's an important decision. I do ask that we decouple those conversations from the other conversations, whether or not you should oppose the bill. It's a stupid bill. Of course we should oppose the bill. It doesn't have a sponsor. There's 28 days left in session. I don't think the bill is going anywhere. I'll probably have a public comment on that bill. But I think on the first topic of whether or not we should hire a lobbyist, I'm not sure that I heard an answer for Danny, what are you going to do for the town? I work for a large healthcare company. As part of that job, I do have lobbyists, and I do work closely with our government affairs team. Every day, those phone calls go out to lobbyists. What are you doing for us today? Every afternoon, what did you do for us today? There's 28 days left in session. This bill, again, does not have a sponsor. I don't think at this time we need a lobbyist for the town. I think there's enough people. I think that Trustee Williams, you clearly have passion about this. You have a very strong opinion. Your voice will be heard. I don't think at this point we should be having a lobbyist. So again, three things. Thank you for giving it as much notice as possible. Let's try to decouple these conversations around the agenda items today let's talk about that bill, let's talk about that lobbyist, but let's try to decouple those things because on the special session these are important. And third, regarding the lobbyist, I think it's premature to hire a lobbyist on a draft bill that doesn't have a sponsor, that 12 separate folks that you've spoke to within the last couple of days are all against. It's premature and it's very expensive. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one thing that I have to agree with you, Kevin, is that I think we started the conversation we have, because this is such a heated topic, that we did cross over, and the decoupling is, I think, is very fair. Let's just deal with the first things first. We'll have plenty of time to discuss the second thing, so.
Okay, so along those lines, we're still on item number 4. So do people want to chime in about the importance or lack thereof or opinion about engaging a lobbyist? Trustee Williams.
So I am in the mindset that this is just a precursor. And this is being introduced now. I know it's late in the session. I don't think they're thinking that it's actually going to go anywhere. They do have a sponsor. It's Senator Boyd, Betty Boyd. And
Although I have to chime in, when I called her office, they said that they weren't sponsoring it, but I take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I confirmed today, this afternoon, there was no sponsor.
okay, so that's changed since Monday when I was told it was her. Regardless, I do think that this bill will be reintroduced in the fall when the session begins again. I'm at no doubt. I think this is just the beginning. I'm sure they'll tweak the bill so that elected officials are more comfortable with some of the aspects of it. At least that's my opinion. I originally was thinking we don't need a lobbyist. We could all just divide and conquer, go down to the Capitol and go down through the names of the Senate and the House. And when we started discussing that, well, what day do you have? Well, what day do you have? And I mean, I've already spent countless hours at this point on Monday, and I will tomorrow night and tonight. It'll be a very, very long meeting for the Dr. Cog meeting, so if you are planning on going, plan on the long haul. So it's just a lot of time to put in, and I'd love to put that time in, but I do have another life I have to attend to before it falls apart. But, you know, I'm definitely putting in more than I can at this time. So I'm leaning towards a lobbyist. I'm certainly not an expert, and I've never been a lobbyist, so.
Trustee Pennington, Trustee Gross.
We talked in terms of a not-to-exceed amount. Can I deduce from that that there is an hourly rate with a not-to-exceed amount of $10,000? So to the extent, then, that we begin work on this, it goes nowhere, we've got 1 week invested, we've got part of that 10 grand spent. After Dr. Cog meeting tomorrow, if in fact this receives majority, if it's floated, it's voted on, and it receives majority approval, which, remember, the Jefferson Parkway project received, I think, strong majority approval. We're in a minority.
It was 35 to 17.
Right.
Yeah.
And if it receives approval, which I would project it will, then the horse is out of the barn. And who knows how fast this could proceed. So I'm not going to be wishy-washy about it. I think that a not-to-exceed amount of $10,000 is a very, very wise expenditure for this community. To put it in perspective, it's 1/10 of the amount we've got budgeted for flowers on street corners this spring. And it has the potential to really position us wisely in this fight to protect our community against heaven knows what, as well as to, I think, retain some semblance of a chance with the broader Jefferson Parkway issue. I would like, at some point tonight, to be able to ask the lobbyists some questions, but if we want to stay true to the subject of, in general, whether a lobbyist, I'll defer those questions to
Well,
later.
I'd like to end up item number 4 and then go on to the other one. So if it's related to this, then feel free to ask questions if it's regarding the lobbyist. Otherwise,
Somebody else have something before I would ask the lobbyist a couple of...
Trustee Gregos.
I think, as Trustee Williams said, that elected officials, town manager, town staff, and a lobbyist is a stronger team. We can play different roles. We have a common goal, we have a common vision, but I think in this particular case, I know it's being introduced late. I know there are only 28 days left, but I know in government there are a lot of things that get passed at midnight. 11:58 when everybody's asleep, and so I don't. This issue is too big for us to just say, well, let's just see if they introduce it in this legislative session. Most likely they won't. I'm not willing to take that risk, so I'm in favor of.
Trustee Hansen.
Yeah, my thought is that if we truly don't think that it's going to have any legs in this session, but we think it's going to go back up in the fall, why wouldn't we wait till the fall to do it?
Are you willing to take that risk? Is what I'm saying.
Well, I guess we need to find out what are the odds of that happening. And
No, it's not.
Trustee Cirilli.
Yeah, I think there's some value to starting now, even if it doesn't come up and then comes back in the fall, in that we can at least make clear and maybe gain allies on particularly obnoxious portions of this bill that should not even be considered by any authority in the state. And, you know, it troubles me that this could even be considered. And when you think of the recent trend regarding eminent domain, and it's a very fine distinction between eminent domain for commercial purposes and this bloody act here, and it really is an infringement on all local authority. So we can't afford to even let this thing, we have to do everything we can to make sure it doesn't have a life in the future.
Okay. Trustee Pennington, questions regarding this, or is it? after
I
item number
wanted
5?
to ask the lobbyist some specific questions.
Certainly.
Is that? So it's Mr. Williams, right?
It is.
Um,
Danny.
You have a wide range of clients. Are you are you a sole lobbyist, or do you have a company of
Yeah.
lobbyists?
Yes, I do. I have a business partner, Laura Locke. So
Okay.
it is officially called Williams and Locke.
Okay.
Again, we make sure that we don't take on clients, one, that we can't believe in, and believe that they need representation. So we turn away a number of clients. And she does an awful lot of the behind-the-scenes work. She does a lot of the communication, computer work, and I try to do most of the eye-to-eye contact.
So my question goes more to, can you drop whatever has occupied your life up to today and get to this immediately?
That's what we talked about yesterday, was making sure that we can do you a good job immediately. And yes, we believe we can do that. Again, to sort of address one of the public comments, I see this as a really broad task. I see a lobbyist, whoever you choose and whenever you choose to do it, as being the constant voice, eyes and ears of Superior at the General Assembly, so that that General Assembly knows if they have a question that they can contact that person and they can get a response. And the same runs the other way, so that when you want to get a message to somebody or a group of folks, that happens and happens immediately. So when we find things out that are going on with this bill, that we can get that information back to you so you can respond as quickly as possible. With 28 days, and you're absolutely right, that the legislature will begin to work nights, and they're even been known to work on weekends, and it only takes 3 days to pass a bill, and I have seen major bills pass the last 72 hours of session. And most of the big issues that this General Assembly is facing are still on the calendar, because they procrastinate just about like everybody else. And so that's when the fight usually occurs, in the last waning days of the session, which is likely one of the reasons this bill is considering being introduced, is because they would hope they could get introduced in the last waning days of the session, and the public wouldn't even know about it. So there's, and is there a bill? I talked to a number of legislators, a number of lobbyists today. There is pressure being put on Senator Boyd, and I know that there's discussions going on with Representative Vaught on whether or not they should introduce this bill. This bill didn't just happen. As you know, each legislator gets 5 bills, and there's a deadline for those introductions. That deadline is come and gone. So the leadership of either the House or the Senate, and we believe this is a House bill, had to give approval for late bill to be introduced. So somebody has already done enough legwork to make sure that this bill could have late bill status and could be in drafting so it can be introduced. That don't just happen. So this is more real than you think, even if we can keep one from finally getting introduced, or it dies a rather immediate death. And one would hope that that's the case. So the question is can that lobbyist get you a job done immediately? Yes, I believe I can do that. I would believe that there are other lobbyists that are out there that undoubtedly could do that too. So I'm not here trying to beg you for a job. I am here at the response of Tim Gablehouse because we go back years and years of working together on a number of variety of issues, and we met with your city manager. I would be tickled to work for you if that's what you want to do.
Did you have something?
Trustee Williams.
I'm ready to move on to the discussion.
So, I'm wondering if you could just give us a day in the life of a lobbyist. Where do you go? Who are you talking to? Just not in extreme detail, but just,
But
general.
instead of being so general, I'd like to hear what the day in the life of you as a lobbyist is for this specific topic.
Well, the first thing you do is you wake up and look at yourself in the mirror and realize that the only person that is lower than a lobbyist would be a lawyer lobbyist. And they would be lower in the stratosphere. You're going to have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and look and say, yes, I'm a lobbyist and I'm doing public policy and I'm helping people get their voice heard at the Capitol. So my day starts at about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. I've got lots of emails and lots of phone calls that begin early in the morning. I get to the Capitol by usually about 7:30, having first stopped at my office for any necessary issues that might be going on there. And then I spend my day at the Capitol. And as you know, the legislature prints calendars for both the House and the Senate, which you should begin to avail yourself of through the internet so you'll know what's going on there. We know then what our day is going to look like and what the week may look like. Those are always subject to change, so I need to make sure that I know what's going to go on in those committees, what bills are going to be heard. Have I worked with clients to make sure that they know when that hearing is going to be heard, and to help organize their testimony, help organize their effectiveness, hopefully get those clients to have meetings with legislators prior to any bill being heard. So that goes on all day long in both the House and the Senate. We call with a 5-bill limit, 100 legislators. There's usually about, in total, about 700 pieces of legislation introduced that have to be completed in a 120-day constitutionally mandated session, not to exceed 120 days. It's an awful lot of legislation to occur in 120 days on a variety of subjects. So that's how my day operates, and right now we're sort of in that session where part of the session where a number of the other clients, their major issues have been completed or nearly completed, and that's not unusual. So at this point in the game, I believe I have time and resources to be your representative should you choose to do that at the Capitol. Again, it's terribly important, I think, especially for public officials, to interact with their counterparts, i.e. their state senator, state legislator, and it doesn't have to be just yours. I think those in the general metropolitan area are still yours. And so to help you develop a strategy and make sure that those conversations can occur, whether they're through email or whether they're by phone or whether they're in person, still have a tremendous impact. So to help you develop those talking points, to help you develop what you want to say in a concise way is terribly important, because those legislators, again, 700 pieces of legislation in 120 days, there's 2 pieces of glue that hold that system together, time and trust. So you have to absolutely be concise, and secondly, you have to tell them something that they can take to the bank. So to have a professional lobbyist help you develop those kinds of strategies, I can't overemphasize how important that is. Now, should you choose not to do that, I think that you are in good hands with Tim Gablehouse, in good hands with the city manager, and I think you can generally develop some of those strategies yourself. I think you can develop your talking points. I think you can make those contacts and do a good job. The question is can you do all you want to do? That's the question.
Thank you.
Okay. Additional discussion of this particular item?
Yeah, just real quickly. So if we waited and say in 3 weeks we see this is going to be introduced, are we able to come back to you at that time and say, okay, we want to bring you on now, and then you can react and you can work for us?
And I'm going to answer that, but going back to my original comments here, having been a local elected official and having been in the legislature, I can tell you this bill is far overreaching. This bill is draconian, and this bill in its current form will not pass. The question is if this bill gets introduced and scaled back, will something pass? And the answer to that could be yes. Could you do this on your own without a lobbyist or wait a week? Absolutely. You're under no gun here. The question is in your own minds, representing your own constituents, do you feel compelled to do everything in your power to affect the outcome? Or do you believe it's more prudent maybe to wait a while, see what the lay of the land looks like, do your contacts, do your strategies through your resources that you have available here, and that may be sufficient. I'm not going to tell you it wouldn't be. So if that's what you want to do, you can certainly do that. It's just a lobbyist is that belt and suspenders, so you have a professional on the ground in place to make sure that you've done everything that you can do to affect the outcome. So.
I'd like to make a motion unless there's more discussion.
I guess my only discussion about this is that it's unfortunate that it's come to this point. You know, I hate the thought that the town is potentially thinking about hiring a lobbyist to go against a bill that you mentioned is so bad that I can't imagine that a well-reasoning legislator would ever let that cross the desk. You know, it doesn't. I think it's a lawyer's make-work bill that will be litigated forever if that were ever to get to that point. So I'm conflicted about it. So with that, if there's a motion.
An opportunity for another public comment?
I suppose so. We're pretty informal here, but
Kevin Ryan. What's the harm in waiting here? And there was a couple very direct questions that were asked, not yet answered. You know, the direct question about an hourly rate. And I know that's hire the lobbyist, not hire a lobbyist, and you're not going to get involved in the town business of negotiating the contract. My experience is usually that there is a monthly rate, and you don't want your lobbyist out there on an hourly rate because that bill is going to get run up pretty quickly. This is a draconian bill. There is no reason why we shouldn't just wait. Wait until tomorrow to see the outcome of Dr. Cog. I don't know if you saw the questions. So tomorrow, I don't think they have my understanding, they're not voting on anything. They're seeking permission to ask questions. The questions were shared with me. I don't know if they've been shared with you. They're really good questions around the eminent domain, which scares them. And it should. So I don't think they're going to be supportive of the bill tomorrow. I would propose that we wait until the Dr. Cog meeting. This is a special meeting. You guys obviously have other lives. This is obviously important to me. I live pretty close to Indiana, around the corner from Trustee Pennington. I'm going to stay. My commitment to stay involved. I have contacts in the legislature. I know there are other people that will also stay involved. So from a first position, hire the lobbyist. Again, I don't see the downside for let's just hold our breath for a little bit, a couple days, see what happens. Thank you.
thank you.
One more comment, Andrew.
Yes.
We have a board meeting on Monday, right, next Monday. So why don't we table this until then? You'll get your Dr. Cog meeting in. Let's understand, what happens there. Let's do a little more research on it. I agree. I don't think we need to rush this right now. Let's discuss this again and finalize it Monday.
Once again, this is within the discretion of the town manager's purchasing authority within that level, so I guess we could give direction to the town manager. I mean, maybe Dr. Cog says the outcome will be, nobody supports this, and it's foolish to do so, so we could give staff direction to wait to see what the outcome of the Dr. Cog meeting was, and then proceed forward if the manager's comfortable with that.
So can I reiterate what I thought I heard? So if the DRCOG board has some support, or majority support, then we can give our town manager the discretionary choice of choosing a lobbyist or not.
Yeah, and, if it was close to 50%, I guess I would let the manager use the best discretion. I mean, if it was even close to 50%, yeah, I'd be really interested in that. If it's like one person, if it's the Jefferson County Commissioner who's supporting this and everybody else is opposed, then probably not so much. So
I guess the question would be, how many elected officials that would support it would you want an action taken? Would you consider it serious?
I would, once again, I think I'd leave it to the manager's best discretion, after hearing that. So one is not enough, 37 is not required, some reasonable thought that there actually might be action taken on it. So, and I think that I have utmost trust in the manager being able to make that decision.
Well, I completely concur on the trust of our town manager. The question is, do we wait
Until Monday?
Is waiting going to be detrimental? Is, I guess, the biggest question.
I don't think we'd have to wait till Monday either. I mean, once again, it's within the manager's purchasing authority, so I think that he could just proceed forward one way or the other, depending on what the outcome of the DRCOG meeting was.
That's correct.
Okay, well, you can still make a motion, it can be voted down, correct?
Certainly, yep.
Okay. I move to approve the funding for a lobbyist regarding the Jefferson Parkway and the Beltway Economic Enhancement Project bill.
Motion by Trustee Guerrero, second by Trustee Pennington. Further discussion?
Yes.
Trustee
further
Williams.
discussion. When is the soonest this bill could be introduced? What is feasibly possible?
He's looking at his watch.
Tomorrow morning.
As soon as they're in session.
I'm sorry, I guess I need to have you at the mic.
I'm sorry, Tim Gable House, the moment they're in session. So it could drop tomorrow.
Do you know what committee you think that it would be directed to?
I would guess it would go to House Transportation, chaired by the potential House sponsor.
Okay.
So,
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so.
Yep. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
regarding-
Yeah,
So,
we have the right to have
Tim,
discussion.
if it did go tomorrow morning, then what's the time frame? What's the process from there?
Second reading, you could be before Transportation Committee on Thursday. Be before Transportation Committee on Thursday, you could be out of the House by this week.
Okay. Well, I would still say that we at least wait to hear back about the DRCOG meeting. How many people vote on DRCOG?
Somewhere between 40 and 70?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big body.
Trustee
Huge.
Pennington?
Big table.
I dislike tying this simply to the DRCOG action. The DRCOG group is not state legislators. It's local and regional and county legislators. So the sentiment there may or may not be reflective of the sentiment at the State House. I, on this issue, believe totally in a preemptive strike. I do believe that the growing negativity towards this bill is because those of us who view it as draconian are getting the word out that this is draconian. I believe the fact of John Aguilar's piece in both the Daily Camera and the Denver Post, which brought this to the light of day, have been critical, and our own mayor's comments and Marjorie Sloan's comments, et cetera, have been critical in helping develop the negative response. So I totally believe in a preemptive strike. I'm very proud of the fact that the town of Superior actually was the entity that brought suit first on the Jefferson Parkway, and that has nicely percolated outward to where now people are considering, hey, are there safety issues regarding plutonium? And we've got that conversation going. So to the extent that an expenditure up to $10,000, and I'd ask that that be managed closely by Mr. Gablehouse and Mr. Williams, can preempt us having to take much more expensive, much broader action later. I am all in favor of that.
Okay. Additional board discussion? Otherwise, we have a motion and a second. Phyllis?
Cirilli?
Yes.
Gregoris?
Yes.
Hanson?
No.
Muckle?
No.
Pennington?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. That brings us to item number 5, discussion and approval of a resolution opposing the BEEP bill. Mr. Magley?
Thank you, Mayor. You have two versions of the resolution. The first resolution that went out with the packet this afternoon, and then Trustee Pennington had some comments on the resolution that we printed out for the board and placed on the front of the dais for you to review there. Her edits are in bold for your reference, and then we printed out clean copies of both resolutions opposing this bill for the board to consider.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to start? Trustee Pennington?
Could I maybe just talk through the bolds? I have it here I printed in red, but I don't, for some reason. The first edit is look in the headline, the introductory
The
paragraph.
resolution.
Yeah, our resolution of the Board of Trustees, I changed the name to the actual name that it seems to be going under, the Beltway Economic Enhancement Project Act. So I corrected that. Then if you look in the second paragraph, that last clause, I changed, if you'll see the old, whereas said current configuration, I added the clause both for health and environmental reasons and because it does not truly complete the Denver Metropolitan Region Beltway. I felt that reflected why we did what we did. The third whereas, I just cleaned that up. The act would create the Beltway Completion Authority, a new authority to pursue the completion of Jefferson Parkway. I would amend my own amendment by adding the name of the act there. So it would read, whereas the Better Economic Enhancement Project Act would create. Joe tells me that upon first reference, we should reference the entire title. Is that correct, Joe?
That's usually what I...
Okay. And then the fourth paragraph, if the bill passes, it would take away, that wasn't edited, I don't know why I highlighted that. The locality's 1041 powers, meaning that the authority with a capital A could design and construct a roadway, one word, without, and this clause is different, considering any impacts on a local community or its residents, rather than any of the elements from a community's shared vision, which seemed to me a little bit nebulous. So I just changed it to considering any impacts on a local community or its residents, which made it more discreet in my opinion. But I'll just go through them and feel free to edit away. Next, whereas I added overall local government and private property, so that it was clear that it's private property as well. The last whereas on the page, I just capitalized act. Next page, I just added the name of the official title of the act there. So anyway, feel free to...
Trustee Williams?
Okay, so I would like to propose in the fourth whereas, at the end it says construct, according to Sandy's edits here, construct a roadway without considering any impacts on a local community, comma, its residents, comma, or shared vision. I think the shared vision is important because part of Boulder County and this whole northwest corridor has a shared vision, and that vision is largely open space. And that is partly why this particular authority is creating such a sweeping power, is in order to break up that shared vision of this entire corridor. So to me, that, I want to put that in.
Deb, would you be open to specifying whose shared vision, say, for example, or a region's shared vision, so we know whose shared vision it is?
It could be that. I'm open to that.
That's where I got sort of hung up.
And your suggestion would be?
What she said, without considering any impacts on a local community, its residents, or a region's shared vision, or a regional shared vision.
I like regional.
Regional shared vision.
Okay.
Trustee Cirilli?
No, I was kicking. I was wondering what the shared vision was, too.
Of open space.
I know that in Dr. Cog, they have a Metro Vision. I was wondering if you were getting at that, but of course,
No.
that begs the question, because this may or may not be the shared vision of Dr. Cog.
Right, it isn't, and I agree that it probably should say regional, because it could be any regional shared vision. I mean, other areas of the Denver metro area do have a shared vision, and it isn't open space like it is in this region. So leaving it open as regional shared vision sounds good, but definitely not metro vision.
Trustee Gregos?
It's nothing specific about this, just my feelings about this whole thing.
Yeah, please.
Now would be a good time.
This is
So, this is it. So, I've been serving here close to 6 years. In the last hour, I've heard the word draconian 4 different times, from elected officials, from the resident of the town superior, and from our council. In the last 6 years, I don't think I've heard that word once. So that puts it into perspective. And as you know, most of you know, I'm kind of a moderate, I'm the peacemaker up here, that's how I ran. Rarely have I been so passionate about something. I was stunned when I read it. The amount of unlimited power that this entity could have. So, as a student of history, if we go back to our founding fathers, they, in their wisdom, almost foreseeing things like these that might happen in our history, they said, "We the people." I don't recall them saying, "We the few people that are representing a few special interests are going to obliterate the rights of the everyday citizen, of little towns, of hamlets, in the name of money." And to go around this judicial process because they don't want to wait is unconscionable, is the other word that I've heard a couple times so far today. So for me, this is probably the worst bill I have ever seen. And I know we tend to speak in hyperbole in today's, we use the words always and never a lot, right? But in this particular case, it's appropriate to say this is the worst bill that I've ever seen. Not to be overly dramatic, but for students of history, I was born and raised in Europe. This bill, if it were to pass, this is what happened in Germany in the 1930s. Now, I'm not speaking as some fanatic or some extremist when I say that. That this is really, if you think about giving somebody, some entity, that kind of power that obliterates everybody else's rights, that's a bad road to go down. I'm completely opposed to it, and I will do whatever is within my power as a citizen and as an elected official to make sure that this doesn't pass. Or any aspect of this, like you said, it may start draconian, and they may start slicing it up and have some kind of... The whole idea of a dominant eminent domain, to me, is downright unrighteous dominion of the citizens of the United States and what's in the best interest of the citizens of Colorado. That's not the way it's supposed to work. So, there you go. I have a lot more to say, but that's just the start. So.
Nice synopsis. Thank you.
Okay.
Other thoughts?
Yeah.
Trustee Cirilli?
I find it ironic in our recent history, Superior's recent history, which I'm beginning to get paranoid of being from Superior. We appear to be feeling targeted in almost every time we turn around. But the Highway 36 EIS, when it was drafted and finalized, considered what was the preferred interchange solution of northeast, what we commonly refer to as a northeast loop at the McCaslin interchange. One of the reasons cited against developing that choice was that it would involve a taking of private property. That private property, I think, amounted to maybe part of a parking lot of one business, but at most. But anyway, that stopped a potentially good, safe interchange solution. And yet here we have authorities in our state at least bandying about the possibility of such broad eminent domain powers that it's unfathomable. The irony just escapes me. Anyway, I'm opposed to this bill. I support this resolution.
No. Other thoughts? I mean,
On the resolution?
yeah.
Any other edits?
No, we're good.
Anything about the edits? I mean,
I'm fine with
I
the
think the
edits.
strongest thing about this is really that it's designing an authority that is trying to circumvent the will of the people based upon the representation through local government. And that is abhorrent to me. So I think I can probably oppose this.
And of the edits, the one that I think is most influential and strategic and important is both for health and environmental reasons, and because it does not truly complete the Denver metropolitan region beltway. Those two issues in that sentence are very, very important.
That's dangerous. If they pass this bill, it might just complete the beltway.
But there are health and environmental reasons, and that is why a environmental EIS is very important in moving forward, which
Public-
would not occur with this
Public
bill.
comment regarding this particular action item?
Trustee Hanson was going to say something.
Nope,
No,
I
you're
agree
good.
with everything you're saying.
Trustee Payne?
Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Town of Superior Resolution Number
R-30.
R-30, Series 2012, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior opposing the Beltway Economic Enhancement Project Act, anticipated to be introduced in the Colorado State Legislature.
With the edits as proposed by Trustee Pennington.
And
Check.
Trustee Williams.
Oh, yes.
As
I
edited.
forgot that.
As edited.
In the third and fourth whereas.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Trustee Williams, got that part.
And
Somebody has to second it, actually, first.
Yeah. There's a second by Trustee Williams. Further discussion?
One further discussion?
As many further discussions as you would like.
If this is approved tonight, I'd like to be able to send this out to the DRCOG board. And obviously, you plan on sending it out to other entities?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure staff can send it out to Dr. Cox, so you don't have to do the clerical work, and I'm sure staff will send
Okay,
it
well-
out to all the legislators at the Capitol as well.
Maybe you can CC me on it, or however you want to, ensure that, just put me on it. If you want to be the one sending this out, I'm fine with that.
We'll make the edits, get the mayor's signature, send it out to everybody. So,
Trustee Pennington.
if I may, and I'm going to ask Deb for utmost honesty here, we tend to get communications as DRCOG members from other DRCOG members, and they're very effective in that manner. So if you had your druthers, would you send it out, or would you have staff send it out to your fellow DRCOG members?
I would have myself send it out.
And I would second that in terms of our typical method of communication with other DRCOG members. So
Makes
no insult or anything intended,
No.
but it is quite effective to have two
Another-
fellow DRCOG members speak to each other.
Well, and I think that they certainly won't delete it.
Right.
When they see who it's from, they
We'll
won't
read it.
delete it.
Are you sure?
Well, there might be one that will delete it. I'm sure there's one.
Yeah.
We will send you a copy to
Okay.
send to Dr. Ogden, and we'll send it to the other entities.
Only if
Thank you.
the entire board
No,
feels
it's
comfortable
fine.
with that.
It's not a-
Okay.
This is not a big issue.
Yeah, I guess, so I would do it for Dr. Cog maybe with a cover letter from you, and then for the other ones, I guess I'll have the,
You've not taken a roll on
I know we have,
Okay.
we're still in the discussion category, yeah. So it probably makes sense for me to sign the cover letter that are going to the capital.
Completely agree.
Yeah, okay.
So does that go to the Boulder County Commissioners too, or is it?
You can go ahead.
They're on Dr. Cog,
Yes.
right?
All of them are, and
Not
I
all of
believe
them.
so.
City Council?
I'm not sure they are.
Not, you don't think every Boulder County, if not, I'll
Can we take a
just...
vote first?
Well,
and then
We should
Yeah,
probably
I
do the vote and
agree.
then discuss
We
what
need
you're
to
going
have
to
the
do
vote
with
first.
it once it's passed. But as of right now, it's not passed.
Right,
Yeah.
let's take a vote first.
Can I,
It's premature.
I have a clarification thing. Phyllis, are you working off the edited version with the bold faces in it?
The one that was on our desk.
Okay, just so we're all copacetic. And then, I'm optimistic here, but our reporter hasn't gotten a current version of it unless you handed him one, so if we could get that to him for accurate coverage, that would be nice.
Okay.
Let's do the vote first.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous, thank you very much. Anything else to come before the board this evening? Trustee Bennington?
So, a couple things, just two in reiteration, and want to thank you. Kevin, your presence here tonight has been terrific, and I want to encourage you to come every meeting. You really provided valuable input, and I mean that. Your input was, I think, very powerful. Secondly, in terms of additional steps, I mentioned early on about involving our residents via an e-blast, and possibly this would be something to e-blast out to residents, get this resolution as approved out to residents, and then we can ask them to write letters or emails or whatever to whatever set of local, regional, whatever legislators, Matt, you determine, or somebody determines, you and the mayor, or somebody determines. But I do think sooner rather than later, it's wise to involve our residents in this proactivity. And then for those of us who are inclined to, Mr. Williams and Tim, if some of us are inclined to go to the Capitol, and Matt and whoever, how do we coordinate that, and with whom do we coordinate that, and is it advised? You know, I want to just follow up on that aspect.
Tim Gablehouse, you're of course free to do whatever you want. I mean, as an elected official, you can go down there and talk anytime. What I would suggest we do is that we use Danny to identify whether or not any of the legislators want to hear specifically, and see if we can get time with them, rather than just stalk them outside the chambers. I tend to find that that's not all that effective. But depending, for example, on what happens at Dr. Cog, if we get an adverse vote or potential adverse vote at Dr. Cog, then I think it would probably be appropriate to have Danny start setting up some appointments.
Okay, so
I
should
would
we
like that.
coordinate, should we coordinate with you, Matt, on that? And
Yeah.
you'll serve as the coordinator?
Well,
Yeah.
work with Tim and Dan.
Okay.
And it's better use of your time as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, schedule.
Yeah, the harder schedule is the legislator's schedule, and what's going on down there.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else to come before the
Yes.
board this evening? Trustee Sorelli?
I've heard talk that some talking points have already been developed. If so, I'd like them shared, so,
For Dr. Cog?
for any audience, any talking points we've developed as,
I
besides
suspect that'll be part.
draconian.
I suspect that'll be part of the lobbyist action plan to develop the strategy, which would include the talking points, which would include whether or not to schedule meetings.
I really don't want to just walk around saying I feel like
Aye.
I'm being picked on.
Yeah.
And did you develop something for Dr. Cog for me to speak on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything
And-
else to? Oh, Trustee
Yeah,
Sorelli.
I mean, that, again,
Yeah, that's
if any of us are going tomorrow night to, if this is there going to be a chance for public comment?
Oh,
on
yes.
this particular issue, or just general public comment?
There'll be general public comment.
So
But
you
that's
raised
the
this-
time to do it.
Yes,
So it's on items
That's what-
on the agenda?
exactly.
You want to drive?
I'm driving. Anyone wants to be in my car, I can take a total of 8 seats.
I have to get clearance.
Offline.
I have engagement right now.
Anything else to come before the board? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you.